Founded by the elusive Qatari trillionaire Syed Khan in 2230, Chronocorp launched with the stated mission of developing time travel technology. That technology never came to fruition. Nevertheless, its corporate coffers swelled immensely from breakthroughs in quantum sciences that greatly increased humanity's computational capabilities. Such advancements led to significant leaps forward in everything from agriculture to AI to water management and welfare allocations. Nearly a century later, in 2323, Chronocorp was reincorporated in Seoul, Korea by the highly secretive Moon Foundation and traded as a publicly traded company in possession of humanity's only known quantum travel technology, Fluxtec, which enabled travel to parallel universes. These extraordinary technological assets were hotly debated amongst world leaders, both individually and through the World Council. On the eve of hostile military action against Chronocorp facilities and Moon Foundation board members, Chronocorp acquiesced to open limited access and to share quantum travel technology with certain signatories in what was known as the Chronocorp Mutual Fluxtec Usage Agreement. Monetary gains from even the extremely limited and restricted use of Fluxtec were beyond any of the wildest earliest estimates. Despite global accords to the contrary, most Chronocorp executive functions and decision-making remain a mystery to the public. A true world government did not come to pass until 2212, when the very last of the 192 signatory nations, the United States, was forced to cede the last figments of their global supremacy and join. The World Council represented the culmination of 75 years of planning, backdealing, wealth redistribution, and armed conflict. The result was relative peace and calm, mostly through intelligent, efficient, equitable global distribution of basic necessities such as food, water, electricity, and housing. The average amount of collective human suffering was brought to its lowest in species history due to the World Council's efforts, but the overlord government was not without its faults and its detractors. The World Council used an artificial intelligence called the Core to distribute resources and coordinate the countless activities meant to sustain humanity. But in its tireless efforts, the Core also managed to displace millions of citizens from various countries to other parts of their homeland. This AI also dissolved several nation-states and consolidated others, all of course with the 192-member Council's tacit approval. The forced migrations and other heavy-handed adjustments to where people were allowed to live created a sizable and angry diaspora of opponents to the World Council. But ultimately, the billions of world citizens who benefited from almost 2 centuries of World Council governance greatly outweighed the voices of those few who over the generations had not received the same boons of stability and prosperity. Armed tensions amongst allied nations came to a head in 2290, as proxy forces battled terrorist cells in Western Australia. Following the loss of life in what amounted to a civil war within the World Council, the Council established a singular military force called the Armed Alliance. The accord to form this new all-encompassing force was signed in Washington, D.C., and the member nation, United States, accepted its role as host for its leadership. Since the Armed Alliance was the de jure world military, it necessarily became a signatory to the Chronocorp Mutual Fluxtec Usage Agreement, which gave authorized members of its fighting force the license to travel to parallel worlds. Most of these lances were for purposes of escorting non-military personnel and otherwise providing armed protection. Although it was rumored that Armed Alliance officers also lanced at the behest of corporate interests to provide in-depth military strategies and logistics for purposes unknown. The Foundation of Academic and Applied Sciences, or Foundation, was conceived by Dr. Gooding Banquest, Dr. Gary Marshall, and Dr. Tijani Dangote in 2180 as a way to oversee several dozen humanitarian initiatives requiring disputed patents, including desalination machines, solar panel technology, and 3D printed house constructors. The initiative received overwhelming support by most global populations that were beleaguered by cataclysmic climate change. The Foundation's humanitarian efforts were only one part of its vast mission, but they served more than anything else as a precursor to the founding of the World Council and a unified world government. Aside from effectively reducing human suffering in select parts of the world, Foundation scientists raised humanity's understanding to ever greater heights in all areas of science, most notably in biology, cosmology, ecology, and quantum physics. The Foundation was narrowly able to join the Chronocorp Mutual Fluxtec Usage Agreement in 2323, thus granting select members of its organization the license to travel to parallel Earths. The most obvious hope was that its scientists would return with scientific data and observations that would raise home Earth's understanding of the sciences to dizzying new heights. The Order of the Continuum began as an online movement in response to the initial discovery of parallel world travel in 2280. Over time, it established a physical headquarters in Portland, Oregon, and formulated an eccentric leadership. The former business and spiritual leaders who now led the Order all claimed to have experienced quantum travel themselves, or otherwise had an encounter with a quantum being of one description or another. Over the decades, the Order managed to secure sizable funding for its esoteric goals, and on the eve of lancing technology itself being announced to the public, the Order managed to prove to the world that some of its members had not only achieved quantum travel, but had mastered some of the mysterious aspects of quantum ephemera. Due to this extraordinary revelation made to the public, the Order was granted signatory status at the 11th hour to the Chronocorp Mutual Fluxtec Usage Agreement. This agreement gave license to some Order members to accompany other persons on trips, or lances, to parallel Earths using proprietary Fluxfall technology. The job of any traveling Order member was to serve as a so-called navigator, one who could help a lance team negotiate metaphysical aspects of the trip as needed. The Global Intelligence Apparatus, or Apparatus, was a counterintelligence and surveillance arm of the World Council. It was founded in 2215, only 3 years after the creation of the World Council itself. It served as the umbrella intelligence agency that coordinated human and signal intelligence at the highest geopolitical levels. Due to the complexity of its bureaucratic mission, Apparatus directly utilized the artificial superintelligence known as the Core, which also managed World Council logistics. However, Apparatus was given its own kernel on the Core and allowed to operate independently and without review. Apparatus as an organization is truly decentralized, with no headquarters or host nation. Instead, it operates through myriad secure office and field locations. Its members undergo almost inhumane indoctrination and vetting procedures, and they are perpetually monitored during the course of their careers and in retirement in order to ensure secrecy and loyalty to the Apparatus and its mission. Apparatus members often clandestinely embedded themselves inside of other organizations, including Chronocorp and all the signatory factions of the Chronocorp Mutual Fluxtec Usage Agreement, which allowed them to lance to countless parallel Earths and secretly assess any possible threats to home Earth. Fluxtec is a general term referring to all devices that directly interact with quantum time-space and aid in the travel to and from parallel Earths. It is based on early breakthroughs in the quantum sciences made in the 2280s, but further refined by Chronocorp and miniaturized for more robust, widespread use. The technology was controversial at first because of the potential power and wealth it granted its users. Nations feared that if not shared, Fluxtec could enable a single state or even a single actor to gather technology and resources from another Earth, return to home Earth, and irreversibly disrupt the geopolitical and economic balance. After a mutual usage agreement was signed by several factions, controversy turned to the very nature of Fluxtec. According to its detractors, the technology damaged the space-time continuum with every lance. In fact, they pointed out that the term lance was not chosen by accident, that it was always known that the process for Fluxfall ripped, tore, or pierced a sensitive ether they called the Continuum. The quantum hub is one of two key components needed to make Fluxfall and travel to a parallel Earth. By default, the device is not much larger than a regulation-size hockey puck, and unusually heavy. When Fluxfall is initiated, the hub scans for quantum transceivers. At the moment of Fluxfall, which is either after a countdown or immediately after initiation, a sphere with a 10-foot or 3.05 meter radius is formed. This sphere is called the Fluxfall Horizon, and anyone wearing a quantum transceiver within that sphere at the time of Fluxfall will travel to the destination Earth unmolested and without injury. It has been a subject of intense debate, the implications of lancing from outside of the Fluxfall Horizon, but typically those who are not within the sphere at the time of lancing but are wearing a transceiver sustain some kind of serious injury to mind or body. The size and nature of the quantum hub has been known to change, sometimes radically, in response to erroneous Fluxfall coordinates. In classified reports, Lancers have returned to home Earth with a functioning quantum hub the size of a coin, and in other instances, the size of a dinner table. The quantum transceiver is one of two key components required for Fluxfall and the travel to a parallel Earth. These devices are issued to licensed Lancers and are typically worn around the neck or on a belt. When the quantum hub, the centralized Fluxtec device used by a team, achieves Fluxfall, any Lancer must have their transceiver somewhere on their person in order to successfully travel. Chronocorp does not publicly acknowledge any instances of travelers being separated from their quantum transceiver during a lance, and being stranded on a foreign Earth. However, declassified files have revealed this to have occurred dozens of times by the year 2390. The Mark IX Disruptor Pistol is a handheld kinetic induction weapon developed and perfected by the research arm of the Armed Alliance. It uses antimatter induction to shave a microscopic portion of a graphene feedstock rod and accelerate that particle of matter to hypersonic speeds. The result is a short beam of plasmic energy that deeply singes flesh on contact and can degrade the surface of solid materials. This latest model contains the same destructive potential of its predecessors, but can be easily folded and stored in a belt-mounted pouch for added discretion on foreign Earths. Durafiber is the material used for all Chronocorp-issued fieldware. It is a synthetic woven material that is light, breathable, and flexible, but due to its pseudo-nanite carbon structure, can withstand kinetic impacts, extreme temperatures, and lighter ballistic abuse. Chronocorp introduced Durafiber in 2340 and took the scientific world by storm. There were no previous indications that any such technology existed on Earth, and no obvious precursors. Some speculate that Chronocorp appropriated the technology from an alternate Earth and claimed it as its own. This would be a violation of several major bylaws in the binding agreement that allows Chronocorp to use Fluxtec at all, but thus far world leaders have not pressed the matter. The Continuum is a theoretical construct that encompasses all of time and space in all of its nearly infinite iterations. Adherents of the theory have postulated that the Continuum is self-aware and observes the actions of all living things, although empirical evidence of this is lacking. Detractors of Chronocorp patented Fluxtec, the technology that enables travel to parallel Earths, claim that the lancing process directly harms the Continuum. They go on to conclude that the Continuum is responsive to this harm and invariably retaliates against any offensive elements after a certain threshold of harm is reached. Chronocorp officially denies any element of the so-called Continuum theory, stating that its Fluxfall technology is completely safe and causes no environmental damage of any kind. When the phenomenon of disentanglement begins, a Lancer inexplicably gains superhuman powers and abilities that modern physics cannot account for. However, as disentanglement progresses, for reasons not understood, the Lancer eventually disassociates with time-space and is corporeally lost. This has long been understood as the death of the Lancer, since their body often materially explodes into particles of light and permanently disperse. Lancers have often reported encountering an individual who bears a striking, if not identical, appearance to them on their travels. These foreign individuals have been categorized as either doubles or Doppels, depending on their general intent. Any copy individual whose general intent is helpful, friendly, or otherwise harmless is referred to as a double, and those copies who exhibit any general kind of hostile intent towards Lancers are called Doppels. Quantologists and related experts are at a loss to why Lancers encounter doubles and Doppels so frequently, but theorize that the quantum hub navigation algorithms are biased towards Earths containing quantum signatures matching those of the people wearing transceivers tethered to them at the time of Fluxfall. Chronocorp has not acknowledged or formally addressed a growing concern that Doppels may have returned to home Earth in the stead of the original Lancer and infiltrated key positions in home Earth factions. Secret faction archives contain a number of disturbing accounts by quantum travelers who claim to have encountered hostile, non-human or parahuman entities. Each of these entities has been deemed by one faction or another as official threats to their mission and to home Earth. In each case, the origin of the entity is believed to be other than home Earth, thus they are collectively referred to as external threats. Terranovians are a faceless race of bipedal humanoids who appear to have the ability to travel between parallel Earths without the use of Fluxtec. Instead, they appear to slip in and out of a world using innate biological means. Their goal, in many observed instances, is to initiate a mycelial terraforming process on any Earth they visit, a process which over the course of centuries results in a planet entirely devoid of endemic plant and animal life and utterly hostile to human life itself. Japanese intelligence agents first encountered Terranovians in 2227, nearly a century before humankind would officially begin lancing to parallel Earths. Over that period and through into the modern day, the Japanese government has maintained secretive formal ties with the Terranovians, even successfully capturing images of them using a patented spectral photography. It is not known what the Japanese intelligence officials have ever discussed with these outsiders, nor if they have struck any agreements on behalf of humankind. A large arachnid-like species, standing 10 feet tall in adulthood, quantum spiders have been observed to slip in and out of parallel worlds by use of sheer will and biological abilities. Although they possess 5 legs to a side instead of 4, these creatures largely resemble various species of spiders, including tarantula, as well as longer, more slender, hairless species. Lancers first encountered quantum spiders in 2354, only 2 decades after humankind began lancing in earnest. They described an Earth dominated by these creatures who had built their own advanced civilization, but whose hallmarks had no analogy to human civilization. It is believed that quantum spiders are invasive and have conquered an unknown number of human-dominant Earths in a violent fashion. The Visayan are an upright serpentine species that do not appear Fluxfall capable or able to quantum slip naturally. Instead, they excel at infiltration and by some accounts possess spacefaring technology and weaponry that vastly outclasses anything from home Earth. No Visayan has ever been captured, questioned, or interrogated, but it is assumed by their aggressive espionage and assassination tactics that they all hail from a single massive fleet of interstellar ships. These ships support their diaspora, and rather than settle on any given planet, Visayan agents are charged with securing the resources of a planet and transporting them up to the ships in order to maintain the highly demanding lifestyle of its inhabitants. An elite team of Chronocorp commandos never returned from a search and rescue lance in 2376, and it was concluded that they became stranded on a world dominated by Chronocorp itself, Earth EE2147F-UU. Subsequent reports indicate that this team proliferated on that Earth and triggered a hostile corporate takeover of as many Chronocorps across as many Earths as possible. These takeovers are facilitated through the violent incursion of elite commando teams who appear identical to the original team lost in 2376. These Chronocorp containment cells are ruthless and are reported to be instantly hostile to anyone attempting to thwart their mission. The commandos have been known to use assassination, kidnapping, aerial assault, and mass bombings to achieve corporate takeovers, after which they pass the responsibilities of the boardroom to their superiors on Earth EE2147F-UU. Quantum deities are the least understood and most feared of the external threats. These entities have been observed as sometimes having the appearance of dragons, sometimes of humanoids, and at other times of abstract shapes and colors. They seem to possess the ability to reshape a world's position in the time-space continuum at will, not just merely travel between universes. This godlike ability makes them the greatest threat to home Earth if their intent is in any way hostile. Some experts theorize that quantum deities are nothing more than an extension of the continuum itself, and that they act as a sort of immune system response to damage done to the continuum. Others posit that the reality-changing powers of quantum deities are limited in some ways, and that they all have the less lofty goal of dominating parallel Earths by any means necessary.